Well, welcome everyone to today's webinar, Centering Children when Supporting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Families. My name is Dana Shen. I'm an Aboriginal cultural consultant and I'm your facilitator for today. Before we get started, I just wanted to acknowledge all the lands that we meet from today, wherever you are. I want to pay my respects to the elders past and present, the emerging leaders, the land and the waters, wherever we are. And of course, also want to pay respects to the allies that we have in the space today. Thank you for joining and wanting to learn in order to better walk alongside our people. So thank you, everyone. Before we dive into our discussion, I have a little housekeeping to go through. There'll be no live Q&A as part of this webinar. However, the panelists will be taking some time offline at the end of the webinar to address some of your questions. This, along with the main session, will be recorded and made available on the aifs and Emerging Minds websites in about 2 weeks. You can submit questions via the questions box in the GoToWebinar dashboard. There's also related readings and resources, handout section of the GoToWebinar dashboard. And we know this is a really big topic. We can't cover everything, but we're certainly going to do our best to explore a range of different topics today. Before I go any further, I also wanted to recognise and acknowledge those who have lived experience of any of the topics we discussed today. We just wanted to acknowledge where systems have hurt people and also recognise how people have made it through. So many people get through and do amazing things in their lives, so wanted to recognise you and your expertise. We'll be talking about child experience and voice, which can at times highlight where this doesn't exist and it doesn't happen well enough. So, take care of yourself because sometimes there's some hard stories to listen to. So please do whatever you need to. So let me introduce the topic again for all of us. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children are overrepresented in nearly all statutory services, including child protection, out-of-home care, and the youth justice system. In the lead up to Reconciliation Week, this is an important discussion held in partnership with Emerging Minds on how to better centre children's experiences, concerns, and aspirations for their future. The theme for National Reconciliation Week 2025 is Bridging Now to Next. The theme reflects the connection between past, present, and future, and calls on all Australians to step forward together to look ahead and continue the push forward, guided by past lessons. So, today I'd like to invite you to consider this for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. How do we learn from the past and also provide real opportunities for children and young people to have pride, to know who they are, and to have hope for the future? That's what this is about today. One thing I also wanted to recognise is that we don't have children and young people on the panel today. This takes time, it takes support to do that in the right way. And I want to also acknowledge that we have adults on the panel who have done this. They've done this in their personal and in their professional lives. So we'll be speaking to how that works. So their full bios are available in the handouts tab, but it is my great pleasure to welcome Commissioner Jacqueline McGowan-Jones, Nicole Hucks, and Beck Turner to the panel today. Welcome to all of you. So before we get started, it'd be really lovely to hear from each of you about who you are and what you bring to the panel today. And not the things that are in your CV, but you as a human being. What brings you here? What have you lived that's actually brought you to the place we are now? So, Beck, I wonder if we can start with you.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Dana, and hi, everyone. So I'm a mum and a stepmom to 3 gorgeous Pinjarra children, aged 7, 9, and 14. And I'm also an auntie. And alongside my husband, I do my best to support our family to embrace and grow in their understanding of their culture, but also acknowledge my place as the non-Indigenous parent of Aboriginal children. So in our family, we do have several generations of removal and disconnection from family, culture and country. And this does impact our children's ability to be able to connect with their cultural identity. So today I really appreciate the opportunity to share from this perspective some of the things that we strive to do as a family to support and nurture our children as they grow.
Thank you, Beck. Nicole, how about you? It'd be great to hear a little bit about you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nicole Hucks here. I'm a Larrakia Wodjigan woman from the top end of the Northern Territory, and a Aranda and Mutjera and Kaditch woman from down in the centre, the lower half southern part of Northern Territory. I am a mother of two young girls, 4 and 6. I work full time. I'm currently working as General Manager of Aboriginal Peak Organisations, Northern Territory. I'm a qualified social worker with a background in child and family welfare for the last 20 plus years. My experience, my professional and personal experience is that living, working amongst Aboriginal family and community, I've a vested interest in ensuring that our children, our little ones, get the best start in life. And as a mother, that I support my kids to get the best start in life, and that includes pushing and advocating for options and opportunities for our kids. I've also had experience in terms of child protection, both professionally as a child protection practitioner, but also personally with family members, as Beck also pointed to. We have that experience in our family context. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicole. And Commissioner Jacqueline.
Hi, thanks, Dana. So I'm Aranda Warramungu woman from the Northern Territory, Alice Springs, Tennant Creek. I'm third generation stolen generation. I'm the eldest of 10 children. My father spent most of my life in prison and died in custody. I have 21 kinship and foster children and 6 homegrown children. And I am currently the Commissioner for Children and Young People, which was my dream job because my whole life has been about how we support our children and young people. They're not just our future, they're our right now. So I just want to point out the beautiful artwork behind me that the kids, I'm at an Aboriginal school this morning and the kids did this artwork for me to welcome me to their school. So I have worked in child protection, education, Indigenous Suicide Postvention, the National Indigenous Suicide Postvention Service. I was the CEO. I lost my daughter niece to suicide and my mum. And I want to make sure that systems don't continue to fail our kids the way they have done for time immemorial since colonisation.
Thank you, Jacqueline, and thank you for sharing all that wealth of experience that you've gone through too. Thank you. Okay, so as you can hear, everyone, you've got some very deep and different perspectives that are going to be able to be shared. So I want to start at the very beginning. What does it mean for a child to have a voice, to have an experience that is shared? What does it sound like? What does it look like? What does it feel like? So Beck, as a non-Aboriginal parent, I wondered if you could share a little bit about what that means for you first.
Yeah, sure. I think it can be very individual for kids. Having a voice can mean a lot of different things. It can be speaking, expressing themselves, the experiences that they're going through, and that they demonstrate to us, their behaviours, their gestures, and even them not wanting to say anything. So I guess I feel for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children particularly in the context of generations of disconnection, to express themselves or identify with their culture can be challenging. So, and that's in our family's experience. And I guess my husband and I, we work extremely hard to try to not to continue to perpetuate the intergenerational trauma that's happened and that's been present, still is present in our family, our extended family. And so for us, it's about, I guess, intergenerational healing and finding ways to relearn and experience culture and identity that is inherently our children's right to have. So I guess what this looks like and feels like and sounds like is that the way that we intentionally seek out the opportunities for our children to feel connected, and we don't live on, you know, their great nanas and Jammu's country, and we are on a journey of creating avenues to have meaningful access to their kin and country and culture, but we connect with mob where we live. So we connect with Nungas here in South Australia, and our kids know the importance of this and continue to grow in their curiosity about this. And I'll tell you something really sweet that happened just this morning. So I overheard a really beautiful conversation between two of our kids, and you might be able to hear I've been a bit sick, and I was actually losing my voice. And I have been talking to them about talking on this webinar, and one of our kids said, "Oh, will you be able to do this webinar today? I'm a bit worried. Your voice doesn't sound too good." And our littlest said, like really seriously, he said, "Do you know," to the other one, "do you know who asked Mum to do this?" "No, who?" It was Auntie Nancy, so she has to do it. And so shout out to deadly Auntie Nancy Jeffrey from Emerging Minds behind the scenes today. But you know, the truth is she is their auntie, and they know this, and this is just so beautiful to me that we have this connection, and that our kids know and respect their aunties and their elders, and even when we do live so far away from them. So I hope that's spoken a bit to what you've asked there, Dana.
Oh, it's perfect, Beck. Thank you so much. Nicole, I wonder if I can come to you now in whatever way you'd like to speak about it, as a social worker, as a parent. What does it look and feel like, you know, voice experience of children? What have you done in that work, and how have you seen that?
Yeah, look, I think children's voices and providing the space and the place for children's voices is imperative. When children are able to voice their perspectives, their ideas, their wants and their needs, it's very powerful. Too often, us adults, good intentioned mothers, aunties, big cousins, we often tend to think we know what's best for kids, or we think we know what kids want and need. But when we allow our children to have that voice, it's just so powerful and enlightening. Every time I sit down and have a yarn, whether it was in my work or whether it's at home with my own girls, to hear them talk up, I go, geez, these kids are just too deadly, and they're going places, just with that confidence. We give them that little bit more confidence to be able to speak up. I think, yeah, just as a practitioner and having worked in child protection, that's when I think throughout my career, that's where I think it's been the most imperative. Our children are removed at rates higher than their non-Indigenous counterparts, and for us, our kids, as what's been highlighted before, the intergenerational trauma that our families experience, often see our kids in out-of-home care and removed from family. So in care planning in a statutory sense in child protection, it's really important to where possible, and at an appropriate time in the child's life to allow them to be part of care planning and to assert and determine what it is that they need in terms of their education, their support, who their primary carer should be, what activities they should be engaging with socially, recreationally and culturally. That's the other critical thing, is, as Bex described, that real need to ensure that our kids maintain a connection to their culture and grow strong in their identity. It's so critical to their not only their social and emotional well-being, but it impacts on their physical well-being. So, yeah, look, I think when children's voices are heard, it is so powerful. I previously worked as the NT Children's Commissioner. I was with the Office of the Children's Commissioner here in the Northern Territory for 8 years and acting Children's Commissioner for 2 years. Over the time in the office, was able to engage in a number of formal consultations with children and young people, usually based on a specific subject matter, whether it's education or racism. There was a more recent one done on racism. That information that we gained from those consultations, really powerful and impacting in terms of how decision makers and how policy makers really understand practically what children and young people are going through, and trying to facilitate a child-centred approach and response wherever they can. That's critical. Thanks.
Thank you, Nicole. And look, I do want to do a bit of a follow-up question, because I don't want to lose track of something that Beck said earlier. She was talking a bit about, the importance of intergenerational, understanding intergenerational trauma, but also intergenerational healing, and also mentioned the complexity of identity, understanding who we are given the history that we've had here of colonisation. And given your work as a social worker and in child protection, so I know from my own background that there are young people at times, children, young people, that are not always wanting to reconnect. They're not always wanting to find about family or identity because of their history that they've had. I just wondered if you could talk a bit to how to do that then, because we hold these two things in tension: the desire to have our people find their way home, and then the rights of an individual child about how they do that. Nicole, I just wondered if you had any views about how to work with that, because I know it's a big question for people.
Yeah, definitely. And that is unfortunately a real scenario for some of our children and young people who find themselves away from family and often in care. For me, it's we see children go through the care system and exit the care system, often not any better than when they entered the system, and often worse. Due to ongoing trauma or traumas that they might be exposed to whilst in the care system, unfortunately. But in my experience, having worked with both children and then young adults who have transitioned out of care and doing some, case management with some of those young people, there is often that there's a little want to know who they are deep down. And as I said previously, my answer to the first question was, at the right time and place for kids, we need to provide them with the opportunity and the platform, because that's really critical. And there's no right time to talk to anyone around who they are, who they belong to, where they belong to, what country they're from. But I think having that information and being ready to have those conversations, whether it's in a personal or professional context. I have nieces and nephews who often struggle with their Aboriginal background and heritage and the connections, and often come to me and ask me questions around, oh, who's this family? Are we related to them? Or, and so I'm always ready and willing to provide them with that that information and to connect those dots for them, because I think it's critical, not only that they understand who they're related to and hopefully don't get into a romantic relationship with, but where they come from and where that lineage is and their ancestry. And I was just up late last night doing a bit of family tree mapping and connecting some more dots. And ancestry DNA is great, but it opens up a whole lot of a can of worms, and I'm now trying to connect some more dots. So yeah, I think it's just the time and the place, and when our children and young people are ready, that we are ready to support them on that journey. If we don't have the information, we support them to get that information. And I've got one little quick example. I know I'm taking a bit of time, but I was working with a young man in youth justice in Victoria, and he'd been disconnected. He was close with his maternal grandmother, Koori grandmother, Aboriginal grandmother. He'd been running amok for a little while, for a few years, and over the years he'd become disconnected from his family who were living in regional rural Victoria. Whilst I was engaging with him at the youth justice facility, he had a real knack for painting, and then he had one of the Koori elders come in and working with him doing Aboriginal art. And this young fella started to engage, but had previously not wanted to know much about his Koori heritage or reconnect with his family. But it was a space of nearly 2 years, this young man managed to make a trip back to his town, his rural town where he grew up for the majority of his childhood, and reconnect. And the difference that I saw in that young man just over that time that he reconnected, he'd become full of life. He had aspirations. He thought about the future and what his direction, where he was going to go in his life, and what he wanted to do in terms of further training and an employment pathway. And it was just really, really lovely and heartening to see that journey for that particular young man.
Beautiful. Thank you, Nicole. And now to you, Jacqueline. How about you? What does it mean to you? What have you seen? What does it look like when you hear children's voice?
The thing we know is that our children and young people really are the best arbiters of what they need. And it's not just hearing their verbal voice. It's about watching their mannerisms. It's about watching their behaviours. It's about giving them the right opportunity to speak. So, as I said, I'm at a school today and we are doing our biggest survey, so up to 20,000 students this year, called the Speaking Out Survey. But we recently administered the survey into the youth detention facility. And the staff were telling me there was one young boy, no, he didn't want to do the survey, and he's wandering around the room and he's for about 20 minutes, right? Doesn't want to sit down. The other boys are sitting down and they're doing it. And then finally he decided he would do the survey. And he asked to come and sit down and do the survey. The thing wasn't to try and push him into doing it. The thing was to say, that's okay, bub. This is your opportunity. It's about you. It's not about, there's no right or wrong answers. But if you don't want to do it, you don't have to. So you have to work at the pace of the children that you're working with. One of the most common things I talk about when we talk about what is the behaviour or what are the physical cues. So I don't know how many families say, oh, there's Nan Jack, go and give her a hug. And they hide behind your leg. Well, they don't want to give me a hug. Please don't force your child to do something that they're showing you they don't want to do. So that is the same when you want to hear what they want to say. You have to look at what else is going on, not just their words. But you have to be able to make a space for them to do that. So this morning, I've had the best morning. I started the day in the kindy class with the kids in there. So they do a yarning circle at the start of the day every day. And I sat down on the floor. They'd put 2 chairs there for Sharon and I to sit, but no good. We sat on the floor. Probably I'm a bit old for that now, just so you know. But anyway, we sat on the floor and the kids really opened up. And we didn't force them. We didn't go round the circle and say, oh, and what about you? And what about you? We gave them the space to see if they wanted to ask us questions. We gave them the space. We told them who we were. So that cultural connection of ours is really important for very young children to understand that we know who we are and that there's a connection there. So for me, it really is about how do you connect to that child. Don't think that every child's going to want to talk to you. I mean, I get upset when they don't want to talk because I think, oh, you poor little thing, And then one young girl came over and gave me this biggest hug. It was the best part of my day, but I wouldn't ask them for hugs. That's not what you do, but you listen to them. You must engage with them in developmentally appropriate ways. So one of the things I do when I have forums with kids is we talk to them about, we might say, for example, what's really good about living here on Wadundee country. And this is all kids, not just our Aboriginal kids. This is all kids. And we'll have pens and paper and colouring things. And we might say to them, you can write a story, you could write a poem, you could write a song. I've had rap songs from kids in year 2 and the words don't make much sense to me, but they get up and they're enthusiastic and they tell us their story. So you've got to be able to do it in ways that engage them. And, some of them just draw pictures. And I might say to them, oh, wow, you like living at the beach. Oh, yeah, miss. And when you say that, then they open up. So you have to be able to do it in ways that will connect to them. And I don't have long to connect to the kids when I go somewhere. So I think I told a story yesterday, so anyone who was on yesterday, but I had to go to the Pilbara, and that's not my country, and I haven't spent a lot of time there, but one of the elders there is a very long time friend of mine. And I said, I don't want to just go to schools. I want to hear from kids who aren't at school. I want to hear from kids who are having real difficulties, who are homeless, who are involved in the justice system, who have got perhaps drug and alcohol issues, etc. So, MK, can you please work that out for me through your organisation, and I'll bring the feed and we'll have a yarn with these kids. And that laid the path because MK said, this is the commissioner, but she's an Aboriginal woman. She's here. She's going to talk to you. And she helped ease that pathway for them to feel comfortable to talk to me. And we got the voices of kids who we don't normally hear from, So food's a great thing to bring. I love taking a feed because I'm and I've been eating mud cake this morning. The school bought me mud cake. But it is, what it feels like, I think, for me is it's just the heart. It is that I'm giving children an avenue to say what is not working for them, what is going on, So when I asked the kids here this morning, what would be better in Wadundee country? Oh, swimming pool, skate park. Do you know the government? Can you tell them what to do? Just really open conversation about what they want to know, about what they need, and be open to hearing that. The importance then is to be honest about what you can do. So I say, well, I'll tell the government what you say, but sometimes they don't listen to me, because the worst thing we can do is make a statement back to a child that we're not going to be able to live up to. And especially for our kids, like Nick was saying, that have been in out-of-home care and detention. They've had so many broken promises. It's really important not to try and over-deliver, and the other thing that's really important is to not try and put your spin on what you think they're saying. So instead of, if someone says to me, oh, it's not safe here, say, oh, there's not enough street lights. No. Say, what do you mean? What would make it safer? Because otherwise we're putting words into their mouth. We're not hearing actually what is going on for them. And this morning in the yarning circle, we asked them all, how were they feeling today? And funnily enough, a lot of the kids talked about, oh, I'm good because I had a good sleep because I didn't have to share the bed with my brothers last night. I'm feeling good because I had a really soft bed last night and I was warm. When we asked them what they had for breakfast, one of them's sister's birthday yesterday, so we had birthday cake for breakfast, but allowing them to have that sort of conversation before you try to delve into anything that might be more challenging. Building that connection with our kids, critical. And it's the best job in the world. Nicole knows she was commissioner for 2 years. We love it, don't we, Nick? Because our job is to hear the voices of kids and to make sure that those voices are taken to service providers and government.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jacqueline. So this is lovely because Jacqueline's really gone into now how you create these experiences. So Beck, I wondered now as a parent, in the way that you do it with your own kids, how do you create the experience for voice, for people to be heard, for children to be heard?
Yeah, I guess, generally it is just showing them and telling them that their voices are important. And that means, doing activities with them that are important to them and supporting their interests and, celebrating their successes and milestones, but also importantly, celebrating their efforts and the efforts that they put in. So, and I guess in talking about making sure everyone's heard, our littlest one, he often just quietly goes along, caring for everyone. I always say he's an easy kid, and he doesn't cause much fuss, but he's so, emotionally intelligent and intuitive, and he puts so much effort into looking out for everyone and trying so hard to be helpful. And, he could easily just not get noticed because as much as other kids, because he's just quiet and cruisy. My husband calls him little Buddha boy, So, yeah, so I guess I think it's really important to acknowledge just those everyday little efforts and notice them and celebrate those and just celebrate them for being who they are, I guess. Our little one, he loves to read dreaming stories, and he loves the ABC Kids lullabies, and he loves to sing along in language that he doesn't even know. But that's something we can access, and everyone can access pretty easily. Lots of people can access it anyway. I shouldn't say everyone. And that means a lot to him, and that's a way that he feels he can connect to his culture. For our kids, like has been spoken about, artwork can be a huge way for them to express themselves, and all of our kids are really talented artists and really creative. And one of our kids has recently had their artwork commissioned to be on the local netball team's bibs for the Indigenous round. And so my husband arranged for them to do this and supported them because he knew that this is how they would know how to express their cultural identity, where I think it's hard for them in other spaces in their life. I think, I think about my nephew. So proud of him. He's really amazing at learning languages. So he knows about 7 different languages, but recently he's been trying to learn Pitjantjatjara, which is great. And he's supporting his mum, to learn their nana's language. He makes her flashcards for everyday conversation topics that she can use. And I just think just these beautiful little ways that they find in connecting to their culture is just really important to nurture that in them.
Fantastic. Thank you, Beck. And how about for you, Nicole, in your social work or commissioner work? What have been other ways that you've been able to really create that place for voice, that ability for children to share?
Yeah, as Beck was talking, I was kind of thinking with mum mode, mum hat on. It's interesting, day in, day out in my work, and over the years, I've, as a social worker, having to actively listen to others, adults, children, young people. You do that. It's just part and parcel of your role and what you do. But as a mum, I think there's a real need. I really have to be more conscious of making the time and giving the opportunity and the platform for my own girls, because we get so busy doing mum duties, mum things day in, day out, work full time. It's almost, I often say, it feels like Groundhog Day most days, Monday to Friday. Up, get your shoes on, get your bags packed, get your lunches in your bag, brush your hair, brush your teeth. And it's like it's just this robotic time, and we're going, doing these robotic things. But then when we do get the opportunity, that 20 minutes, because they're dressed early and got their teeth brushed, to in that 20 minutes, open up the conversation and say, what's happening at school, what are we going to do this weekend, what would you like to do, and just talking to them and really getting a feel for where they're at. And I found myself having to be more conscious of doing that, because I'm just go, go, go as a mum. I often joke that, my husband gets the quality time after school with them because I finish later than him. And I go, you have the fun time. It's me in the morning trying to round them up and get them out the door and come on, come on, come on, counting down the clock. But I've just needed to just be that little bit more conscious. I guess in the work, how do we make the experience possible for children? I feel like it needs to be done more. And as you acknowledged at the start of this webinar, is we don't actually have a young person or a child on, and it's often difficult to permissions wise and whatnot. But just making sure that we do actively invite children and young people to say have their voice and say their perspectives in any way, whether it's at a formal webinar such as this, or in a conversation one-on-one, or in a group setting if they're comfortable and feel supported to do so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Nicole. I really, really appreciate what you said as a parent about how hard that can be to make it happen. I think we all want to acknowledge that for all of us, everyone online who's a parent. We're doing the best that we can. We are.
Yeah.
So I think that's so important what you just said. Thank you, Nicole. So I want to move on now to really understand, so a question that I think is important is, how do we balance the voice of children with other issues? So this could be family or community issues. This could be safety issues. How have you done that in your lives and in your work? So, Jacqueline, I wonder if I could come to you first with just, how do you think about that, I guess?
So one of the things for me is that what we want to know is about every aspect of a child's life. We want them to be able to give us their voice on everything that matters to them. And talking about balancing needs, I'm with Nicole, foster mum and kinship carer and homegrown kids, working full time. You know, it was really important for me, especially because some of the kids we cared for weren't kinship, but they needed to be reconnected. And balancing the needs around safety and well-being. And some of our kids are at such a point when we start to interact with them that they are really exhibiting significant behavioural challenges because they haven't had the nurturing and the support, and that is a cry for help. And I think, we often go to, oh, well, they're really badly behaved. But when you're working in that child protection space particularly, we do this really badly, balancing the family need. And, you know, if we speak to a child, because often the conversation, especially when we're removing a child, is with the adults. If you speak to the child, they will tell you who is safe. They will tell you where they want to be. They will tell you that this auntie's great and that auntie's great and that auntie's no good in their own way. And we get a much better feel for where that young person will be safe. For teenagers, you have to work differently with teenagers. These girls all told me the other week, no, they're not on TikTok. And then the other little younger one, no good, she starts showing me all their TikTok videos. But how do you engage with them in a way that's appropriate? And balancing that community need to have our children close so that we can build the village that supports our child, but also balancing the need of the child that might need to go away to school. And how do we do that? And I think this is where centering the voice of the child is really, really important, because we often, as we said at the start, and Nick, I think you said it, you know, we ask the parents what's needed and they tell us all the different things, and parents say, you know, I see it all the time, local government, so they're going to build a new skate park, and I ask kids what they want and they want a swimming pool. Oh, well, bad luck you getting a skate park. You know, we need to ask the children and young people what works for them. And so for many of our kids who go away to boarding school, that's really great and they love it and it works for them, and even though they're really homesick and miss country and family and community. For other kids, it's more than just homesick. They don't like it. So how do we give them an education in a space that works for them? Because you're not going to learn if you're not comfortable, right? If you're not happy where you are, you don't learn. So we have to always say the child's needs are paramount. But we tend to think that balancing the family's need means that we can't put the child need first, and we absolutely can if we speak to the child. We absolutely can, and make a space then to have a really safe conversation with the adults in that circle. But there's always going to be challenges. Unfortunately, we always are going to have some children that we have to remove for their safety. But often what we don't do is ask the child where they think they're safe. And you don't ask them that. But, you know, you say, who's your favourite auntie? If you could live in any house, which house would it be? And they will tell you. If they're an older student, you know, an older child, you change the language. So you can do this in developmentally appropriate ways. You can use different methodologies. You can watch how the child is. And then with the family, you've got to sit down and say, you know what, Bub's a little bit worried at the moment because there's obviously some things going on at home. But they're really happy if they go and live with Auntie Nicole for a little while. How does that work? Would that be good? And engage everybody in that conversation. Instead, you know, we get the parents in if we're lucky. Mum might be in trouble with all the aunties, so she might not want to engage them in the conversation. But the job is to engage them in the conversation. And the way to find out who needs to be engaged is to talk to the child. So the child has to be at the centre. Has to be at the centre. And sometimes that means you get into trouble in community. It's happened to me in various jobs over my career, you know. And especially when you work in your own community. Sometimes it's much easier to work over here out of my own community, and other days it's not. I really miss being home. But no matter what your job is that you're doing, you've got to be able to stand up for the best interests of the child. And parents do that all the time. But sometimes parents need help to do that. And if you're like Beck, I mean, Beck, the work you're doing to bring your kids home is amazing. And if you're a carer for an Aboriginal child and you know they've had an horrific home life before you became their carer, you can't assume that everybody in the family is going to be like that. We also know that the system mistakes poverty for neglect all the time. And sometimes our kids are actually safe at home, but you don't understand from your cultural lens of a 4-bedroom house and each kid's got their own room that, you know, when I grew up, 10 kids in a 3-bedroom house, that we're all going to be in one room because that keeps us safe together, or whatever the different cultural approach is. So it's really important that you put the child at the centre and then you work to bring others to the space.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jacqueline. Nicole, I want to come to you if there's anything you'd like to add on to that answer, and then I do want to come to Beck. So, Nicole, anything in particular that you'd like to add?
Yeah, look, obviously agree with everything Jacqueline just mentioned and pointed to. And also, I think it's always good to test what a child understands of their safety and how they feel, whether they currently feel safe, and also understanding what makes them feel unsafe or a little bit unsure, a little bit anxious. And I use that in both my professional and my personal life when I'm talking with some of my nieces and nephews. How are you feeling? Do you feel supported? What do you do in a situation? Who do you call? And so they'll rattle off to me who it is that they'll call if they don't feel safe. And just hearing that and understanding that these kids have a safety net and have safety mechanisms in place, I think is important. We often think that safety is one thing, but for children, their perception of being safe and being loved and being cared for is different. I just wanted to reflect back on one of Beck's responses about her kids and how different they are. Every kid is different. I say kids are born with their own personality, and mate, I've got chalk and cheese with my 2 girls, and the way I approach each of them, I'm still learning, I'm still adjusting to be able to meet their own individual needs. How I apply myself or open and have a dialogue with one kid is very different with the other. One kid is very emotional and emotive and needs, to be loved and be shown love and care and hugs and kisses. The other one doesn't need that at all. And when she does, she will come to me for a hug and a kiss and a cuddle. It's being able to adjust yourself and be available and flexible and meeting kids' needs on their terms.
Thank you, Nicole. I'd like to come to Beck now about this whole thing about balance. And before asking the question, just to recognize how hard that is in a family to have balance around all sorts of things. Okay, so nobody's perfect. We're all trying our best. But I wondered, how do you balance various needs as well as the child's voice as a parent, Beck, of Aboriginal kids?
It is so hard. And yeah, hearing several things that Nicole said, I think, about how different our kids are, and chalk and cheese. My husband says salt and pepper, like they look different. One looks like me, one looks like him, and the other one's in between. But yeah, their personalities and balancing the needs between them, because we have 2 that are entirely different and they clash, and it doesn't mean that they don't love each other, but they do find it hard to be around each other, and it's chaotic. And also what Nicole said about, the busyness of our lives. I also work, and it's trying to, I guess, meet everyone's need in the family, make sure all the children are being able to have all their hobbies, their passions, everything sort of taken care of, as well as all those day-to-day tasks that all families have, and balancing that, and then trying to, what we've been talking about, trying to nurture their cultural identity within that. So I guess for us, it's about weaving culture into their everyday experiences of life, and their lives. All the activities and values that they witness from within our family and from the community around us. You know, it's incorporating all these elements of culture where we can into that everyday experience, you know, adding in language, you know, artwork, the clothes we wear, you know, the activities we do, the people we connect with, and for us, it's surrounding ourselves with people whose values do align and are supportive of our children's cultural identity and growth. I think we've had, I know there's a lot of educators in the audience today, and I was going to just share about two vastly different experiences we've had with schools, I guess. So our kids have had the experience of being the only Aboriginal kids in their school, and you know, they know that we're connected with other Aboriginal families and elders who live in our community, and the school is really amazing and has, you know, a local Aboriginal woman who's sort of an auntie figure, who the students all know, like right from kindy right up through primary school, and I love that. And I really love that our little one, you know, proudly tells his class, "She's my family." You know, it's easier to come in the school. "She's my family," and we know that, you know, she's claimed us all, and it's so beautiful for us, I guess, living where we do and with the disconnection that does exist within our family, to have that. And yeah, she told me the other day, she was just at the shops and she heard a kid from my kid's class say, "Oh, that's his grandma." He goes, "Oh, you're his grandma." And this means so much because our kids don't have their they've only got their non-Indigenous grandparents who are still with us, and you know, to have those sort of claimed nanas and aunties who help us grow them up in their cultural identity is so important. And then I guess the other different experience we've had with another school for one of our kids was, which is that where we've seen, you know, that the only Aboriginal teacher there is sort of lumped with doing everything to do with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture on top of their everyday teaching role. And you know, they'll do things, and yes, it's Reconciliation Week next week, and it's important for us to acknowledge this and celebrate it, but you know, we can do this all throughout the year. We don't have to just do it during that week and in NAIDOC week and other events that come up. So there's, I think the school wanted to do Wear It Yellow Day, which you may have heard of, and but we were really puzzled when we saw that it was just like, yep, the kids just wear yellow, but they don't give the donation. They're just, you know, being seen to be supportive of cultural identity, but not really following that with actions that represent meaningful support towards the cause. So, and then, you know, trying to offer support or guidance and then being ignored. So, you know, not being invited into the space where we probably could contribute as a family. So, you know, it's how those offers, you know, whether it's school or something else in community, are accepted or ignored. And we, you know, we've given, I guess, what you call tough feedback to both of these schools, and it was really how it was received that tells us about like what is really caring for our kids in their identity. So sorry if I've gone off topic there, but yeah, I guess yeah, that's just some of the things that we've had to balance around that.
No, that's great. And also, you've led us really well into the final question. Gee, this time has gone quick. Like, we've got
Mm.
like about 5 minutes left now. And so we'll need to keep the next answers relatively brief. But it'd be great to hear now, and Beck's kind of taken us in this direction. When we do have child's voice and experience at the front of the mind, when we're really listening and we take that voice as adults and we go and do something with it, what change gets created? So, Jacqueline, I wonder if I can come to you first to give us any examples of where you've seen voice have a level of influence, a child's voice.
Often it's not enough from my perspective. We give child's voices to government all the time and not necessarily does it get heard. But I think where we really see it, and I see it in some schools that I go to, where they just haven't got a leadership group and 10 kids get to speak to the principal, but where they're doing leadership at all levels with all of their classes and all of their students, and they're listening to those students, we see the students want to be at school. When we hear the child's voice and they feel heard, they want to engage. They don't become the shrinking violet. They don't hide in the corner. And, you know, in educational settings, I think I said before, I used to be the Executive Director for the Office of Aboriginal Education. And I developed the Aboriginal Cultural Standards Framework for Culturally Responsive Schools. And what's really clear about hearing children's voice is that they feel like they're able to contribute to their own future and their own well-being. They feel like adults aren't just going, no, you do what I say, sit down, today we're going to do the ABC or the numeracy or whatever. And if you want a culturally responsive school, and Beck said, you know, her 2 kids are the only Aboriginal kids in the school, and often I used to hear from schools, oh yeah, but we've only got a few Aboriginal kids, so, you know, the cultural standards framework doesn't apply. Arguably, that applies even more, right? Because you probably haven't got an Aboriginal Islander education officer. You probably haven't got any Aboriginal teachers, and these kids are feeling totally isolated. And so to be culturally responsive doesn't mean you have to have all that, but it does mean you have to make a concerted effort to engage families in the school, to have that voice. But for children to have a voice, it makes them feel more validated. They are also more likely then to engage you when something is wrong. So often children don't feel like they can tell you something is wrong. They feel like they have to keep a secret. If we've got a space where their voices are heard and they know they can talk about what's going on for them, you are more likely to hear what is really going on. It improves safety for children and young people. Mm-hmm. It improves their own ability to engage and deliver on their own wisdom and experience. And, you know, we talk about the developmental stages, and in being inquiring and being using imagination, and all those things are supported by giving a child a voice. Mm-hmm. What we do see is when I say, for example, we did an inquiry into the youth detention centre and we interviewed 43 of the young kids there and we did a report, and then I took it back out. We did a child-friendly version of the report, took it back out and said, this is what we told government after you had your... They were so excited. Where's my name? How come? And I said, remember I told you it was confidential? Your name's not in this report. But they were so excited, not only that we came back to them, but so excited that what we said, what we said, it mattered. I said, yes, it did.
Mm-hmm. And thanks, Jacqueline. Thank you. We're coming close to the end, but I just wanted to give Nicole and Beck just a final couple of words that you want to share that are important. So you've really got a few seconds now. So Nicole, was there any other key message you'd like to give people about child voice?
Yeah, just quickly, when a child has a voice, you know, they gain strength, they gain confidence, they gain pride, and above all else, we build their resilience this little bit much more, which is important.
Thank you. And Beck, any final word from you, and then we're going to be closing off very soon.
I think so much has been said. I guess everyone, I think, in a child's world can just play a part in how they make meaning their cultural identity, and you just can't underestimate the power of a child truly experiencing being heard and seen and understood in who they are. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Beck. Thank you to all the panelists today. Also to the audience, to Erin Stutchbury and Beth Thomas-Richards from ACE, and Nancy Jeffrey and Rose Shellen from Emerging Minds. Subscribe to ACE and Emerging Minds newsletters to be notified about the recording. And of course, a reminder about the feedback survey. If you could fill that in, that would be wonderful. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinar, which is episode 3 in the Webinar Light series from the Evidence and Evaluation Support Team at AIFS. What is good research evidence and how do you find it? Take care, and we will look forward to seeing you again soon. Well, welcome back, everyone. The panelists have taken a little bit more time to answer your questions in a Q&A, and we're going to be spending the next few moments on a couple of really interesting and big questions. So first of all, the first one, I'll read this out and then I'm going to hand over to Jacqueline. The number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children in out-of-home care in the last 20 years has increased hugely. Shouldn't we expect this number to reduce? Are our policies a good reflection of these children having a voice and that they are heard? Jacqueline, I wonder if I could come to you first.
So the numbers have increased exponentially. In Western Australia, when I was heading up Aboriginal Child Protection, we had 47% of children in out-of-home care. 13 years later, it's 60%. So that's year-on-year increases. And absolutely, that should have reduced. The challenge we have is the way in which systems operate. And I think I referred to this a little bit before, where and it doesn't matter which child protection practice framework you use, they're not understanding of cultural makeup of family and the responsibilities of how we raise our children. And B, we don't centre the voice of the child. So, as I said earlier, when you're speaking to mum, she might be in trouble with aunties and nanas and says, no, they're not involved in this decision making. At the family meeting, it'll just be me. And that's not fair to the child. So we must ask the child, who are the nanas, aunties, whomever. And the other thing is this confusion of poverty versus neglect. And I talk about your cultural lens. So if you grew up in a 4-bedroom home and, you might have had more than 2 TVs and there were 2 motor cars and, all of those things, you had your own bedroom, and then you go along and you be a social worker. And I don't know any social worker who thought, how do I get a job where I can take kids away from their families? So people do it with the best of intent. But their understanding, their cultural understanding is such that, you should all have your own bedroom and you're going to have your own doonas and you're all going to have this happy household where there's cupboards full of food. And then they might be in a remote community and you haven't got a fridge in a remote community often, so you go and buy your food at breakfast time, at lunchtime, at dinner time. You might have, like when I was a carer, you might have 10 kids all sleeping in the living room together because that's safe, because they're all together and you can watch them. But people see this as risk factors they don't understand. I was in a remote community once where they were trying to say, no, this nana cannot take these children because mum and dad live across the road and up 3 houses and there's no fence. It's a remote community. It's not the Hume Highway, and the kids might be able to get on the road. Well, if you want to come out and build a fence, I'm sure they'd be happy, but that doesn't happen. And mum and dad live up there, but nana's keeping these kids safe from mum and dad. But you don't understand because you don't understand what the community is like in an Aboriginal community. So we mistake poverty for neglect. We do not understand the cultural structure of our families and responsibilities of nanas and aunties. And mostly we don't speak to the child in developmentally and age-appropriate ways and hear their voice to understand what's going on for them. And whether that voice is their verbal and non-verbal cues, whether that voice is, I really love Nana and I love it when I stay at Nana's house, or I really love Auntie Nicole, can I go there? We don't listen, and we make an assumption that these kids are better off. I have got to say to you, when I see children that I knew were in out-of-home care at the age of 3 and 4 and who are now 16 and 17, don't go to school, have drug and alcohol problems, are unsafe, and are a safety risk to themselves and others, that is the fault of the department. And what did you do to make the child's life better? And that's about poor decision making right up front. And a cultural plan that says you'll go to NAIDOC once a year. What a load of garbage. Like, we've really got to get better at understanding who else is in the family. Where is it safe? How do we hear the child's perspective? How do we monitor that? How do we understand the cultural context? And we will continue to see more Aboriginal children in out-of-home care and Torres Strait Islander children in out-of-home care, whilst we don't have a good cultural understanding, but also while the frameworks for child protection practice don't align with cultural ways of knowing, being and doing, and while we continue not to engage the Aboriginal community controlled sector holistically in caring for our children.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful, thank you, Jacqueline. So those that are listening to this, and particularly to the person that asked the question and others that have these questions, really, Jacqueline just laid out to you what's required, step by step, on a systemic level, what needs to happen. So the question back to you, our allies and our friends that are listening, how will you do this? How are you going to do this? So Nicole, was there anything else that you'd like to add? Otherwise, I'll move on to the next question.
Yeah, thanks, Dana. I'd just like to point to that second part of the question was around, should we be seeing a reduction in this? Yes, most definitely. We have a national partnership agreement on closing the gap, which has some critical targets around reducing the number of Aboriginal children in out-of-home care across this country. We have a peak Aboriginal childcare agency, SNAKE, who monitor progress against this particular socioeconomic target, which shows that the majority of states and territories are failing to meet this target and won't meet this target by the set date of 2031. That's some 6 years away. There's some big reductions that are needed over that time. And as Jacqueline has rightfully pointed to, there needs to be significant reform of child protection legislation, policy and practice to be able to ensure that our children are being assessed appropriately. And when I say appropriately, to understand what is risk for an Aboriginal child when you are a non-Aboriginal practitioner, as Jacqueline said, coming with your cultural lens and understanding of what is child rearing and what is norm for Aboriginal children and their families to better understand what is their norm, but also from a social work background, it's critical to understand that real point around poverty. Our families, black, white and brindle across this country are living with greater pressures, greater financial pressures. The cost of living is increasing, rental is increasing. Our families are struggling, and Aboriginal families have already felt that pinch and that, the oversight from the child protection, the statutory service systems on them and on their child rearing. So from a social work perspective, we've got to get better at understanding and assessing what are families doing, what do they have within their means and at their disposal, like what is their disposable income available and how are they using that. And I think what we will find is necessarily they are struggling to keep their head above that poverty line, but they are trying to make and do the best for their kids. And I think we need to work with families and we need to support families to gain them access and give them referrals to whatever support programs they can access without getting involved in the statutory system, because too often the tertiary support systems that are implemented once a child or a family comes to the attention of child protection, it's too late and it's too punitive. If only we had, the primary and the secondary, the more preventative services and supports available, we wouldn't see the numbers of our kids and our families in the system.
Thank you so much, Nicole. We now have another kind of complicated question, so this is very interesting. The internet and media have become vehicles for the cultural dominance of those nations and groups with economic and technological power. Teaching media literacy and critical thinking to children is important to helping them resist cultural erosion and help them value their own identity and traditions. What is your opinion? So first of all, I'm going to hand over to Nicole, and then I thought I'd really ask Beck, because the tech stuff's tricky for all of us, who are parents, grandparents, and you might have a parent's view about this. So, Nicole, first of all, your opinion and thoughts on this.
My opinion and thoughts are, it scares the bejeebies out of me. I have, as I said, a 4 and a 6-year-old at home, and where we're at now with accessibility to internet and accessibility to social media and social media platforms and the various forms of those, and critically their impact and influence on our kids and our young people. It's become so evident. I walk around the streets here in Darwin and I see children and young people doing these ones, filming themselves for TikTok or doing lives on Facebook, without, I think in one part of me goes, oh, look at the confidence of these children. I was too shame job to be able to film myself or put that camera looking at me. But then the other part of me goes, oh, what are they filming? Do they understand the context of what they're filming? Do they understand that can then be shared, that they don't have control over where that video or that post that they're putting up can go and where it can be disseminated or how it can be used? So for me, I think what is important is to have these conversations with our children and young people, to say, hey, whilst you're in the moment and you think it's deadly to post about that new shirt you got or that new hair foil colour that you've got, to think about where that's going and take our kids often live in the moment, which is great, and it's great for them to be kids and naive, but I think we need to start, as social media and the impact is becoming evident, we need to start changing our dialogue with kids to get them to try to think about the future and the impact. And hindsight's always a good thing, but I think there are strategies and conversations that we can apply now as parents, as educators, as workers, as aunties, and with our kids to try to get them to think about that future impact.
Thank you very much, Nicole. And Beck, finally coming to you, and not that you have to have all the answers as a parent, because we're all struggling with this, but is there any particular views that you'd like to share around that question about media and our children?
I would say the same as Nicole. It scares me, and anyone who knows me knows that I'm not particularly good with technology, and I'm not on social media myself much, and I know that my kids understand more about this than me, and that's frightening because I'm one of their protectors, I guess. And a couple of the things that probably worry me the most is one is around attention span and how I've noticed that changing for children. That instant gratification that they get from technology, and then their ability to be able to focus and learn and take on information in the way that we traditionally have. The other one is probably around just the the hyper focus on image and what that does to self-esteem to already, vulnerable age groups, particularly teenagers. And yeah, there's some of the worries, and I don't have any answers. I just guess it is important for us as parents, as professionals, practitioners and educators, whatever we're doing, that we're making sure that we do try and keep up with what's out there, so we can protect our children and we can keep them safe and empower them by teaching them how to keep themselves safe, because they're so smart and they know more than us in a lot of instances. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Jacqueline, was there one more thing you'd like to add there?
Look, I would. I think the issue about media literacy is really critically important. We need to make sure our kids have got the right information and tools to make informed decisions for themselves. And they can't do that if they haven't got the learning. We know prohibition doesn't work. Just look at 1920s US prohibition of alcohol. And we're going to prohibit social media. We know that a lot of our kids in rural and remote areas, or kids that are in vulnerable groups, LGBTQIA+, and our Aboriginal kids, rely on some of the networks in social media that keep them safe, that give them support. So prohibition doesn't work. Telling your kids they can't do something is most likely making them want to do it even more. So media literacy is really important, but not just for kids. It's for us. As Beck said, I'm a real Luddite. Like, I'm no good with, just ask Nicole, she'll tell you, when was the last time I put something on Facebook? And so it is so important that we make ourselves aware and that we support our children and young people to be aware and understand and have the skills they need to make informed decisions for themselves.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again, Beck and Jacqueline and Nicole, for this extended Q&A session. And thank you to everyone that is joining again. We look forward to speaking to you in the future at our next session.